A beautiful evening in September 2007. It was a charming evening in September 2007. The weather was gradually turning colder, and as the sun set, the atmosphere became even more delightful and captivating. The soft darkness of evening, accompanied by a gentle breeze, made the surroundings enchanting. A sense of stillness began to settle over everything. For those who love solitude, such an ambience is more cherished than anything. That evening, too, had a mesmerizing charm. When stray, cool gusts of wind brushed past the thin veil of silence, a slight tremor would ripple through the air. The playful gusts of wind seemed to be whispering something unknown in their unique hum. After dinner, I stepped outside for a walk. The moon was still shining from afar, yet to reach the heights of the star-filled sky. The moon that month was a full, radiant disk, glowing in all its youthful beauty. Taking long drags from my cigarette, I walked along one side of my neighborhood and eventually reached the outskirts of the village. In front of me lay a winding dirt road, which served as a shortcut to the main paved road. The paved road was about a 5 to 7 minute walk from the village. My direction was toward the paved road, but I didn't intend to go that far. Just a short distance along that dirt path, there was an open ground where the young men and children of the village played cricket. My plan was to go to that ground. The evening was slowly growing darker and more intense. I knew that no one would be in the ground at this time. I had no particular reason to go there, yet for some reason, my heart was eager to find joy in its solitude. And so, I continued forward, smoking, lost in thought. Various ideas surfaced in my mind, but the fresh, cool breeze and the serene ambience deeply affected me. My steps continued along the dirt road.
The moonlit night, countless stars appeared in the sky, shining alongside the moon. The clear, milky moonlight was falling on the ground, making everything look even more radiant. The moon was glowing with a captivating and luminous presence. All around me, the trees and crops stood, creating a delightful scene. The animals and birds were hidden away in their respective shelters. I was sure that, in the village, only a rare soul might still be outside. Otherwise, with the passage of time, everyone must have retreated into their homes. The evening had deepened, embracing the young night, and the first watch of the night had now unfolded. As I walked along that dirt road, I remained completely silent. The moon was rising in the sky right in front of me, and my shadow followed behind me in the moon's glow. There was no sound, no hint of movement anywhere, not even from my own footsteps. My lips were silent, yet my mind was buzzing with countless thoughts. Yes, tonight held a fatal charm, and my heart felt like the victim, my soul intoxicated, and all my thoughts filled with a mesmerizing melody. This blissful, euphoric state was wounding me in the sweetest way. Under the influence of an unknown force, I just kept walking. My steps began to quicken. I wanted to reach there faster. The ground along the dirt road was not far now. In just a little while, I would be there.
The enchantment of the moonlit night, the gentle, cool breeze, filled with a mesmerizing fragrance, and the soft, radiant moonlight, this solitude and silence, the charm of the season and the ambience, that blissful happiness, and my heart's desires every moment was being imprinted onto my heart. In a few moments, I was in the ground. Tall trees stood around its perimeter, and through the branches, the moon shone in all its splendor. Lost in my own thoughts, I stood there without glancing around. Watching the moon in this lonely setting brought me a strange sense of peace. Slowly, the moon rose higher into the sky. I stood still for a few moments, and then sat down on the clear ground, yet my gaze remained fixed on the moon. Leaning back with my hands resting behind me on the ground, I imagined myself up there on the moon, perched on a ledge of sweet illusions. I could clearly see light grey and white clouds drifting around the moon. I was lost in a trance. Occasionally, a sharp gust of cold wind would strike me, reminding me of my solitude, stirring my awareness of my surroundings. I would recall how far I was from home and wonder what my family might be thinking. Where could I possibly be at this hour? But despite knowing all this, my heart was against me tonight. For the first time, the beauty of this moonlit night had made me a captive, and ignoring everything else, I remained there, alone in this deserted place, for a long time.
The sound of anklets. My gaze was fixed on the bright, round moon, and I was lost somewhere in my own thoughts when, suddenly, the sound of someone's anklets jolted me out of my reverie. Chan, chan, chan. Chan, chan. The sweet sound of those anklets awakened my senses, and I froze. I began searching for this unseen presence with curious eyes, but I saw no one there, even though in the moonlit night, everything was visible far and wide. However, at the far edge of the ground, beneath the tall, wide trees, there was a deep, dense darkness. Chan, 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 chan. The enchanting, soft melody of the anklets rang out in the air once more, whispering in my ears. I couldn't determine the direction it came from. I was completely alone. A mysterious curiosity crept into the atmosphere. My mind began to drift on waves of imagination, a sea of questions swirling within me. Whoever it was moved silently, teasing me. The few steps taken carried a playful mischief, as if they were toying with me. I was certain it was a woman, but she hadn't yet revealed herself to me. Her movements seemed to mockingly taunt me, and I was truly taken aback. The beauty of the weather and the attraction of the ambience began to fade away. A fierce wind started to blow, and soon, dark clouds spread across the sky. The moon was hidden behind this dark, ominous cover, and a black veil fell upon the earth. The environment began to feel.
Hee hee hee, chin chin chin, chin. Once again, the sharp sound of anklets echoed, but this time, someone was smiling along with it in a feminine voice. That unseen presence was not far from me. The voice suggested that she was probably a young girl, yet, she was still nowhere in sight. I had realized that she was no ordinary human. Whoever she was enough to shatter my courage and determination. A moment's thought sent shivers down my spine. My heart seemed to flutter within my ribs. Unwillingly, my breath began to quicken. It felt as if the ground had firmly gripped my feet. A deep black darkness enveloped me, and in that desolate place, I stood utterly helpless. Every thought and suspicion had ensnared me in fear and terror. I wanted to run away, but my trembling legs refused to cooperate, leaving me standing still like a stone statue. My gaze darted around, examining my surroundings intently. I didn't know why, but I longed to see that lost presence. Alongside fear and dread, a mysterious curiosity stirred within me. The clouds covering the sky began to disperse. The moon was slowly becoming visible again, and once more, the milky white glow of moonlight spread across the ground. Everything started to appear as it had before. The force of the winds had subsided. Again, the same soft, flowing cold breeze and the clear moonlight, the same silent and enchanting weather, and the captivating atmosphere began to present a life-giving scene. Yet, deep within my heart, a mystery still lingered. A considerable amount of time had passed, and the sound of anklets had not been heard again. Whoever she was, perhaps she had left or was secretly enjoying my state of distress.
In the pleasant environment, a dreadful silence had fallen. My racing heart urged me to run away, but all thoughts were futile and meaningless. I stood there, still entranced, when suddenly I heard the tinkling of anklets behind me again. I turned around to look back, and I was not surprised. The ground had released my feet from its grasp. A short distance away, someone was walking slowly, bent over. As she walked, her feet produced the sound of anklets intermittently. She was an elderly woman. With a hunched back and a long wooden stick resting on her shoulder, she shuffled along, dragging her feet. She was facing me, walking with her head bowed as she approached. She was only a few steps away from me. It was astonishing that she was wearing anklets at her age. This was a very strange mystery. Suddenly, as she walked, she stopped and looked up at me. Seeing her left me speechless. My breath caught somewhere in my chest, and my heart thudded in terror like a wounded bird. My body was drenched in sweat. My wide-open eyes had forgotten how to blink as I stared at her. The old woman was a terrifying witch. She had no hair on her head. Her long, pointed ears extended high above her head. Her round, fiery red eyes were deeply sunk into her skull. Instead of cheeks, her face had deep gashes from which a thick, black fluid was visibly dripping onto her chest. Her pointed, crooked nose was quite long and drooped down at the tip. She had no lips. Instead of lips, she had long, crooked teeth that were about 4 to 5 inches wide and looked very terrifying. She had lifted her large, blackened breasts onto her shoulders, yet her drooping breast was dragging on the ground behind her. Her big belly hung low, resting on the ground somewhere near her feet. The long fingers of her torn hands were covered in blood, and the nails seemed to be tangled together. She stood there, silently staring at me, and then suddenly opened her mouth. Her long, spiky tongue extended a foot out of her mouth, swaying from side to side. Without saying a word, she lunged toward me. My heart jumped into my throat in terror. She was undoubtedly trying to claw at me, and in that instant, a surge of life and alertness awakened within me. I did not hesitate there. I was fully aware of the danger to my life and ran with all my strength. "Stop, today I will chew you up." He, stop. The old witch laughed as she urged me to stop. I was running back toward the village as fast as I could. She was chasing after me. The sound of her anklets echoed in my ears continuously. Terrified of being caught, my feet moved swiftly. My breath was labored, but I didn't stop for a moment. I knew that if I did, I wouldn't survive. I ran forward, indifferent to everything, and finally entered my village. The witch's voice was no longer audible. I didn't know where she might have stopped along the way. Yes, I distinctly remember reaching the door of my house. No one in the neighborhood was around. People had fallen asleep in their homes. A deep, unsettling silence enveloped everything. My heart was racing, thumping in my temples. My legs felt lifeless. With great effort and courage, I kept myself alert, but fear and panic still gripped me. I stood at the door for a moment, trying to catch my breath. Then, I placed my hand on the latch and unlocked the door, stepping inside. No one knew I had returned home. Everyone in the house was fast asleep. I lay down on my cot and began to think about the incident I had just experienced. I could still remember the details of that old witch. Sometimes, it felt as though she was standing at my bedside, and I would shiver at the thought. I couldn't sleep the entire night. I spent the night trembling with a high fever, and then for a week and a half, I had a severe fever. When my family found out, they brought a spiritual healer to our house, and ultimately, I was treated, and my health was restored. A long time has passed since that incident, but whenever there is a moonlit night, the horrifying memories of the past make my hair stand on end, and I can still feel the tinkling of anklets ringing in my ears. I have never forgotten to avoid going out alone at night.